You think you know what a hero looks like? Think again. What if the fate of two entire civilizations rested on the shoulders of a 62-year-old medic, covered in faded black ink tattoos, not of glory but of ghosts? This is the story of Varkis, an old soul stepping onto the blinding crystal world of Thalaris, where an entire alien race, the Luminar, wears their history like a badge of divine, shining light, and they saw his blank human skin as weak, ephemeral, and utterly unworthy. But when their queen, Sable Vel'thara, asked him a simple, damning question, "Why so many tattoos, old human?" his answer didn't just save his life, it brought an entire alien army to its knees. This is a story about the memories we choose to carry, and the unexpected way an old man's scars became humanity's final, desperate shield. The dawn on Thalaris wasn't a gentle thing. It didn't sneak in with soft, dusty light like back on Earth. It shattered across the horizon. Imagine looking through 1,000 cut diamonds, all vibrating at once. That's the light of the triple star system hitting the planet's upper atmosphere. The entire surface of Thalaris was basically miles of living, crystalline structure, so the sky turned into a blinding, hypersaturated kaleidoscope of violent purple, sharp indigo, and an impossible white. Inside the temporary sterile quarters assigned to the Earth delegation, Varkis woke up with a grunt, the kind of noise a man makes when his joints have seen more planetary gravity wells than they have good mattresses. He was 62, though his medical file always cheerfully claimed 58. His knees felt 90. He sat up, the synthetic sheets pooling around his waist, and in the fractured, blinding light, he looked at his arms. This was the ritual. Every single morning. Before he put on the starched, too-tight uniform, before he picked up the hypospray gun, before he became the jovial, harmless old medic the delegation desperately needed him to be, he had to remember who the hell he actually was. His hands, calloused and stained with decades of antiseptic and tattoo ink, traced the faded black lines on his left forearm. The ink was old. It was good ink, but it had faded with the passage of time and the constant exposure to different environmental shields. "Morning, Daisy," he whispered, his voice a gravelly rumble in the quiet room. He pressed his thumb gently against a small, intricate depiction of a black-eyed Susan flower near his wrist. That one was for his first command. A crew of young green engineers who never saw the dust cloud coming. Daisy was their call sign. He pressed hard, committing the memory to the forefront of his mind. He then moved his fingers upward, where a jagged line of black barbed wire encircled his bicep. "Hell of a winner, that one," he muttered, a phantom sting crossing his skin. "Rest easy, boys. We got this." These weren't just tattoos, they were a ledger. Every single line, every sparrow, every coil of faded Celtic knotwork, every half-finished portrait was a name. It was a face. It was a date. It was a promise he'd made to someone who didn't get to come home. Every human soldier, every fallen comrade he'd ever had to tag, medicate, or leave behind in the war against the other threats, before the Luminar arrived, he recorded their memory on his own body. He couldn't trust data chips. He couldn't trust memory banks. He could only trust the weight of the ink on his own skin. He was a living, walking war memorial. A quiet, portable shrine of human resilience and failure. He moved to his right arm. It was a chaotic mess of ink, a testament to the latter years, the desperation, the sheer number of losses he'd carried. One large, solid black banner across his shoulder felt heavier today. It was the scar of a whole division he'd failed to pull out during the Cygnus collapse. He traced it with a sigh. That memory, that failure, was the only thing that kept him sharp, that kept him honest. The grief was the fuel. The entire delegation, the diplomats, the generals in their immaculate dress uniforms, they all saw Varkis, the weathered medic, the old man with a past. They didn't see the librarian of the lost. They didn't see the one person in that room who truly understood the cost of war. He was their secret weapon, hidden in plain sight. They thought he was here to patch up paper cuts and stress headaches. They were wrong. The Earth Confederacy was in a bind. A big bind. The Luminar, the alien species on Thalaris, weren't just powerful, they were magnificent. Their very bodies glowed with internal bioluminescent markings that were not just decoration, but literal maps of their lineage, their achievements, and their honor. Every battle won, every diplomatic treaty signed, every life saved was rendered in pulsing golden or silver light that flowed beneath their chitinous skin. They were living, breathing historical documents, and they viewed humanity's pale, unmarked skin, or Ren's black ink, with absolute, chilling contempt. Humanity needed the Luminar Alliance. Their advanced technology, their ability to navigate the galactic dark zones, it was the difference between survival and extinction for the Confederacy. And that's why the entire delegation was here, sweating nervously in their starched uniforms, preparing to meet Queen Sable Vel'thara. A quiet chime interrupted Ren's ritual. The door hissed open and Ilara Eswinen stepped in. She was young, maybe 25, a sharp-eyed junior security officer assigned to his protective detail, mostly because no one took the old medic seriously enough to give him a real bodyguard. "Sir Varkis," Ilara said, trying to sound professional but failing to mask the flicker of awe and curiosity in her eyes as she glanced at his arms. "The delegation is mobilizing. Ambassador Clark wants you in the transport in 5 minutes. We need to be on time for the audience with the Queen." Ren pulled down the sleeves of his uniform, the stiff fabric covering the silent memorials. He felt the familiar dull ache of burying his history, but he knew the role. "Understood, Officer Asin," Ren said, his voice instantly shifting to the familiar, comforting tone of the man in charge of wellness, not warfare. "Tell the ambassador I'll be there. Just finishing my morning diagnostics. Gotta make sure this old engine doesn't seize up before we get that treaty signed, right?" Ilara managed a weak smile. She respected him, despite his age and strange appearance. He was the only one in the delegation who seemed genuinely calm. "Yes, sir," she replied, turning to leave. As the door sealed, Ren finished his preparations. He took a small, tarnished silver compass from his pocket. It didn't point north, it was a psychological anchor, a reminder of the fixed moral point he'd sworn to. He clipped it to his belt and secured his medic kit. The journey to the Luminary Citadel was a surreal experience. The transport ship flew low over the planet Thalaris, and everywhere Ren looked, the crystals hummed and pulsed with the alien race's energy. Buildings were not constructed. They were grown, their architecture flowing and razor-sharp, powered by the very light that defined their culture. Inside the transport, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. The lead diplomat, a perpetually nervous man named Ambassador Hayes, kept adjusting his collar. "Varkis, are you certain you have the emergency hypo package ready? If there's any aggressive reaction from the Queen, a sudden display of force, a cultural shock." "Ambassador," Ren interrupted smoothly, his eyes fixed out the window, "I have enough sedative in this kit to put a star cruiser to sleep. You focus on the diplomatic language. I'll focus on the heart rates." He was watching the Luminar guards flanking their route. They were tall, elegant, and menacing. Their armor was minimal, but their bodies were magnificent, covered in the vibrant, glowing biomarkings. One guard, a formidable lieutenant with a helmet that resembled a cracked obsidian mask, had a full chest plate of flowing, radiant gold. That marking, Ren knew from his intel, represented over 2 centuries of unbroken familial service to the crown. Their history was visible, bright, and proud. Ren's history, hidden beneath cheap synthetic fabric, felt heavy, dark, and embarrassing by comparison. The transport finally landed in the vast, shimmering plaza before the citadel. The air was thick with expectation and the scent of ozone from the pulsing crystals. As the ramp lowered, the light of Thalaris hit them like a physical blow. Ren stepped out, his old joints creaking, his heart beating a steady, slow rhythm against the anxiety of the younger staff. A massive, armored Luminar official, General Kthar, met them. Kthar's markings were a lattice of cold, icy blue, denoting a warrior who had executed thousands of calculated, perfect strikes in battle. He didn't speak. He simply gestured with a hand that ended in 3 razor-sharp digits, ushering the small human group into the depths of the citadel. They walked for what felt like miles down a corridor that seemed to breathe, the crystal walls shifting in color with every step. The silence was broken only by the sharp, echoing clicks of the Luminar guards' footsteps and the low, collective pulse of the planetary energy. The tension ratcheted higher with every step toward the throne room. Ren could feel the silent judgment of the aliens they passed. They looked at the humans, small, pale, and markless, as if they were dealing with children. Finally, they reached the massive, arching gateway to the audience chamber. It was a single sheet of diamond-hard crystal, glowing with an internal fire. Ren took a deep, steadying breath. He adjusted his collar, feeling the cool, rough texture of the faded barbed wire tattoo beneath the fabric. He knew this was the moment. He knew the diplomacy would fail. He knew the cultural gap was too wide. The Luminar valued visible history and absolute transparency. Humanity was all about secrets, hidden trauma, and shame. The crystal gate hissed open, revealing the Queen's chamber. It was impossibly vast. The floor was a single sheet of reflective black mineral. The ceiling disappeared into the prismatic light of the 3 stars. And there, on a tiered dais, sat Queen Sable Vel'thara. She was a spectacle of alien grace, draped in shimmering fabrics that did little to hide the astonishing brilliance of her own biomarkings. A complex web of platinum and violet light that flowed across her form, signifying her divine status and the collective memory of her entire race. Flanking her were her most elite warriors, including a hulking specimen known only as Dracos, whose markings were a deep, terrifying crimson. Ambassador Hayes visibly swallowed, stepping forward. Ren Varkes, the old medic, stood quietly at the back, his hands clasped behind him. He looked like an extra, a piece of required but irrelevant set dressing. Sable Vel'thara did not wait for the ambassador's formal greetings. Her voice, when she spoke, resonated not just in the room, but seemed to vibrate the very crystals beneath their feet. She ignored the diplomat entirely. Her focus was absolute, her brilliant, multifaceted eyes fixed on one person in the room. The old man Ren Varkes. She tilted her head, a gesture of almost casual curiosity that contained the weight of planetary judgment. Her voice was cold, sharp, and laced with absolute superiority. "The rest of your people are blank," she stated, her focus lingering on Ren's exposed neck and hands. "Like newborn children. They carry nothing of their history. No honor. No achievement. But you, old human." She paused, and the entire room, human and luminar alike, held its breath. "Why so many tattoos, old human?" she demanded. "Are you attempting to mimic the signs of true worth? Or are they merely a declaration of your kind's primitive, barbaric nature?" The question hung in the air, a devastating accusation. The cultural collision was complete. The treaty was forgotten. Everything rested on Ren Varkes' reply. The air in the crystalline hall was so thick with tension it felt sharp against the skin. Queen Sable Vel'thara's question, "Why so many tattoos, old human? Are you attempting to mimic the signs of true worth? Or are they merely a declaration of your kind's primitive, barbaric nature?" was not a question seeking information. It was a verdict, a dismissal of the entire human race. Ambassador Hayes looked ready to faint, his carefully prepared diplomatic speech evaporating into the ozone-scented air. The flanking Luminar guards, including the colossal Dracos, shifted their stances, their crimson and gold biomarkings pulsing with arrogant amusement. They had been waiting for the humans to reveal their predictable, ignoble nature. But Ren Varkes didn't flinch. He didn't stutter. He didn't offer a meek apology for human imperfection. He maintained eye contact with the queen, a gesture that was dangerously bold. Her eyes, multifaceted and swirling with violet light, bore into his. Ren did the only thing he could do. He started to tell the truth. He didn't speak with the grand, sweeping language of a diplomat. He spoke with the quiet, conversational authority of a man who has seen the absolute worst of the universe and somehow made peace with it. His voice, gravelly and low, sounded startlingly human in the cold, echoing hall. "Your Majesty," Ren began, his hands still clasped behind his back, deliberately keeping the sleeves covering his ledger. "I understand why you ask. You see history as light, something brilliant, undeniable, flowing forever through the blood of your noble race." He paused, letting that truth land. "We humans, we are different. We see history as weight." The queen's elegant head tilted infinitesimally. The arrogance in her posture had given way to a sliver of grudging attention. "When you of the Luminar conquer fear or save a life, or make a profound discovery, your body records it instantly," Ren continued, his gaze drifting over the shimmering, proud markings on Dracos' chest. "It glows. It's perfect. It's easy to be proud of a history that is inherently beautiful and always visible." He unclasped his hands, took a single slow step forward, and deliberately rolled up his left sleeve. The movement was measured and deliberate, exposing the chaotic, black-inked history of his forearm to the blinding light of Thalarus. The effect was instantaneous. The sheer, messy reality of his tattoos stood in harsh contrast to the pristine, glowing environment. A low, guttural murmur swept through the alien guards. It sounded like disgust. General Kthar's icy blue markings flared in contempt. Dracos actually took a half-step back as if the dark ink were contagious. Queen Sable Vel'thara, however, remained motionless. Her expression was now inscrutable, focused entirely on the skin. "You ask why I have these," Ren said, his voice quiet but carrying perfectly through the massive space. "You see primitive, barbaric marks. I see names." He lifted his arm slightly, his finger tracing the small, faded black-eyed Susan flower near his wrist. "This one," he said, looking at the queen but really talking to the memory. "This is for a small crew of engineers. Their call sign was Daisy. They bought us 3 minutes of evacuation time during the Ares flare. They were all under 20. They didn't have time to live long enough to earn a silver light mark on their skin, Your Majesty. They died for those 3 minutes. He moved his finger higher, pointing to the jagged barbed wire wrapped around his bicep, the symbol of the division he tried to save during the Cygnus collapse. This, he continued, a faint tremor entering his voice, but his eyes never leaving hers, is a failure. A beautiful, tragic failure. I promised them I'd get them out. I failed. They were annihilated by the enemy, but not before they disabled the enemy's main jump gate, saving a dozen colonized systems downline. I couldn't save them, so I took the memory of their ultimate sacrifice onto my own body. The barbed wire? That's the pain of the promise I broke. He let the silence settle. He was not apologizing for the ink. He was explaining the human condition. We humans do not have the gift you have, Your Majesty. When one of our own falls, their memory vanishes. It doesn't glow on a successor. It doesn't pulse with their race's energy. It goes into the silent, cold void. The ink is the only way we can keep their light visible. He then rolled up his right sleeve, revealing the larger, more chaotic canvas, the black banner of failure. Your race wears their history as a mark of pride, Ren stated, his tone shifting, becoming a quiet, firm challenge. We wear ours as a mark of penance. Every loss, every failure, every moment of weakness, we keep it on our skin in the darkness of the ink. It's not to mimic your glory. It's to ensure that their sacrifice weighs on us every single day, so we never forget the cost. He dropped his arms, the sleeves falling back into place. These tattoos are not decoration. They are a library, he concluded. They are the only way we ensure that the light of the human spirit, even when extinguished, is never truly lost. They are our accountability, written in blood and permanent marker, and I wear them so no one else has to carry this terrible weight. The revelation had a profound impact. It wasn't the words alone, but the raw, unpolished, emotional truth behind them. The Luminar prized history, transparency, and the visible transmission of lineage. Ren Varkis had just revealed that his people carried those values, but in a profoundly darker, more painful way. Queen Sable Vel'thara's face was now a mask of deep, complex contemplation. The violet light of her own markings dimmed slightly, as if processing this alien concept of chosen grief. A quiet voice broke the silence from the human ranks. It was Alara Eswenen, the young security officer, tears streaming silently down her face. She had never known the real history of the old medic. She knew him only as the kind old man who slipped her extra ration bars. Now she saw the sheer weight of a walking graveyard. Dracos, the massive warrior, grunted, but it wasn't contempt. It was confusion. How could one small, frail body hold so much visible loss and still stand? The queen slowly leaned forward on her throne, her light marks beginning to pulse again, but now with a rhythm of curiosity, not judgment. Human Ren Varkis, she said, the sharpness replaced by a deep, resonant gravity. The marks you show me are a record of those who failed to return. You call it a library. But a library is meant to be read. Tell me the story of one mark that symbolizes a sacrifice made for the sake of hope. Show me that your kind carries more than just the memory of the dead. The focus was now absolute. Ren knew this was the true test. He had to show them that for every loss, a seed of redemption, a spark of hope, had been planted. He had to prove that the darkness of the ink was just the soil, and that flowers still grew. He met her gaze, a small, grim smile touching his lips. He knew exactly which story she needed to hear. The one he kept closest to his heart. The one involving Alara Eswynen's father. Queen Sable Vel'thara's challenge hung heavy in the crystalline air. She demanded proof, a mark of sacrifice that held hope, not just death. She was looking for the counterpoint to the darkness, the reason for humanity's continued fight. Ren Varkis smiled, a genuine, warm smile that softened the hard lines around his eyes. He didn't immediately roll up his sleeve. Instead, he looked at Alara Eswynen, the young security officer standing rigid and tearful behind Ambassador Hayes. Officer Eswynen, Ren said softly, your father hated this tattoo. Alara's eyes widened, a flicker of profound confusion crossing her face. Sir? Your father, Captain Eswynen, Ren continued, looking directly at the queen now. He was not a fan of this particular piece of art. Ren Varkis finally rolled up his sleeve again, moving past the barbed wire of failure and the flower of the fallen. His fingers stopped at a small, elegantly rendered sparrow in flight, positioned right over his wrist. The sparrow was rendered in pure black ink, its wings outstretched, seemingly trying to escape the confines of his skin. This mark is called the sparrow, Ren explained, his voice taking on the intimate tone of a man recounting a story he's told 1,000 times to keep it alive. It's dedicated to a man who, in the eyes of the fleet, was a failure. He was a brilliant pilot, a tactical genius, but he was always reckless. He fought with a desperate fire, risking too much too often. He collected reprimands and medals in equal measure. He had fire but no anchor. He paused, letting the Luminar absorb the concept of flawed heroism. They, with their perfect, luminous marks, rarely acknowledged internal contradiction. In the final weeks of the Centauri siege, Ren recounted, his gaze distant, focused on the memory, we were trapped. The enemy had us pinned on a dying moon. The supply lines were cut. My aid kit was empty. We were eating nutrient paste and waiting for the end. Captain Swenen was tasked with one final desperate mission: pilot a near-broken scout ship through a blockade of enemy destroyers, reach the nearest refueling station, and bring back a single, essential shipment of anti-radiation vaccines for the civilian contingent. Ren ran his finger over the Sparrow's wings. It was a suicide run. Everyone knew it. His ship, the Icarus Lament, had no chance against the heavy armor of the blockade. Before he left, he found me. He was wearing his uniform, but his hands were shaking. He wasn't afraid of dying, Your Majesty. He was terrified of failing the one mission that mattered. The old medic looked straight at Vel'thara, who was now holding her breath, hearing a piece of her father's history for the first time. He said to me, Medic, if I don't come back, I need you to do something for me. I need you to put a damn sparrow on your arm. Not a lion, not a banner. A sparrow. Because that's what I am. Small, easily crushed, but I'll fly through hell just to bring home one little seed. He had a young daughter back on Earth. Officer Swenen, that was you. The silence in the hall was deafening. The Luminar guards, even the imposing Dracos, were absolutely still, mesmerized by this uniquely human blend of vulnerability and courage. Captain Swenen flew that ship, Ren continued, his voice rising slightly with the narrative momentum. He didn't just fly around the enemy. He flew through them. They pulverized the Icarus Lament the moment he cleared the blockade. But he didn't die instantly. He held the ship together long enough to broadcast one single coded message with the coordinates of the supply depot and the authorization key. Ren squeezed his forearm, feeling the ink press against the bone. We got the vaccine. We saved the civilians. Captain Swenen died, not in a blaze of heroic glory, but in a slow, agonizing decompression, alone in the void. He never saw the light of a grateful colony. He never got a statue. He only got the sparrow. He looked at the Queen, his eyes clear and unflinching. You asked for a mark of hope, Your Majesty. This is it. The sparrow doesn't represent the man who flew. It represents the promise kept, the duty fulfilled, and the simple, undeniable fact that even when everything else is darkness, one small, insignificant human will choose to fly home, even if the flight kills him, just to save the ones he loves. He chose to carry the weight of that mission so his daughter, so we, could live in the light. Ren turned to Vel'thara Swenen. The young woman stepped forward instinctively, placing her hand gently on the old man's arm, right over the tattoo of the sparrow. Her tears were no longer of shock, but of understanding. Queen Sable Vel'thara's composure finally fractured. The violet light in her markings began to pulse rapidly, an internal storm of confusion and reluctant respect. But the light, the honor, it is not visible to the eye, she whispered, struggling to reconcile Ren's account with the Luminar's core belief system. It is hidden. It is fragile. It is dark. The light is inside the story, Your Majesty, Ren corrected gently. It's in the telling. And we keep it dark because when a human carries a memory this important, this heavy, we keep it close. We don't flaunt it. We carry it as a profound debt. We make the failure visible so that the next generation doesn't have to repeat it. We make the sacrifice visible so that the next generation knows how to fly. General Kthar stepped forward, his cold blue markings flashing. He was the voice of the old, proud military. This is emotional weakness. If your race records only tragedy and failure, how can you ever achieve true victory? How can you ever inspire your soldiers if their highest honor is mere black ink? This was the core conflict. Ren had anticipated it. He rolled down his sleeves, covering the painful history again, and took a deep breath. General, Ren said, addressing Kthar directly, you look at me and see a collection of human failures. You see an old medic, stained and marked. But look closer. This ink is a vaccine. It is the inoculation against arrogance. Your markings tell you that you are perfect and powerful. My markings tell me I am imperfect, but I am still here. He looked back at Queen Sable Vel'thara, his final point driven home with quiet conviction. We don't wear our tattoos to claim victory. We wear them to ensure the dead still have a place at the table. If you choose to ally with humanity, Your Majesty, you ally with a race that refuses to forget the mistakes that led us to this moment. We carry our grief, we carry our failures, and we carry our hope, not in blinding light, but in the permanent, unyielding promise of ink. The Queen stared at him. The silence was absolute. She understood the weight now. She understood the purpose. The marks were not primitive, they were profound. They were a covenant. She turned her eyes to the human diplomat who was still speechless. The decision was no longer based on trade agreements or technology. It was based on the soul of the species. The council will convene, Queen Sable Vel'thara declared, her voice still resonant, but now tinged with a new, sober respect. Human Renvarkis, you will remain here. Tell my General Kthar the story of the other marks. The ones that only you, the librarian, can read. The general, though clearly bristling with confusion, gave a short, stiff bow. The audience was over. The negotiation, however, had just begun. The human delegation had been politely escorted out of the chamber, leaving only Renvarkis, the old medic, and the core Luminar power structure. Queen Sable Vel'thara, the skeptical General Kthar, and the massive, silently judging warrior, Dracos. The air was no longer hostile, but heavy with intense intellectual and cultural scrutiny. Ren felt a familiar surge of exhaustion. He wasn't a diplomat, he was a relic. But he knew his task. He had to translate the pain of humanity into a language they could respect. General Kthar, his blue markings flickering with aggressive curiosity, stepped closer to Ren. The Queen commanded you to tell me the story of the other marks. The ones you keep hidden. You showed me failure and debt. Now show me the marks that are not tributes to the dead. Ren took a seat on the edge of the polished black dais, a casual gesture that subtly stripped the room of some of its intimidating formality. He rolled up his left sleeve to his shoulder, exposing the entire ledger of his upper arm, including a large, swirling patch of dark, dense black ink near his collarbone. General, Ren began, his tone patient like an old teacher. You believe in absolute honor, perfectly recorded. I am going to tell you about the marks that represent the hardest thing for a human to do. Admit profound shame and then fight to erase it. He pointed to the dark patch near his collarbone. It was the deepest, most saturated piece of ink on his body, a chaotic, almost ugly swirl of black. This mark is called the Void, Ren explained. It's a record of the worst thing I ever did, or rather, the thing I failed to do when it mattered most. Years ago, I was a young, arrogant soldier before I became a medic. My squad was ordered to evacuate a research outpost, a small team that had violated protocol, working on dangerous, unsanctioned weapon tech. They panicked when the enemy arrived, and they refused to come to the extraction point. Ren's voice dropped, becoming ragged with decades-old self-recrimination. My orders were clear: extraction point in 30 minutes, then tactical withdrawal. I saw their messages. I heard their fear. But I chose to follow the letter of the law. I chose to save my own skin and my own squad's safety. I left them behind. The research team was captured. The secrets they held were weaponized. Thousands died in the subsequent engagement. The Luminar general was silent, his luminous markings dimming further, absorbing the horror of betrayal. I was discharged not for cowardice but for obedience, Ren stated flatly. The fleet found me guiltless. My conscience did not. I took the heaviest, darkest ink I could find and covered the spot where my rank used to sit. The void is my vow. It is the visible reminder that if I ever have to choose between a broken rule and a living soul, I choose the soul. He looked up at Dracos, the towering warrior who represented strength and perfection. That dark spot is my redemption ticket, Dracos. It is the cost of my second chance. Every life I have saved since then, every soldier I've patched up, every civilian I've shielded, it is all painted over the void. I cannot erase the shame, but I can bury it under the weight of better actions. Queen Sable Vel'thara rose from her throne, her movements slow and deliberate. She walked down the dais toward Ren. This was an unprecedented gesture of interest. She stopped directly in front of him, her glowing alien form towering over his seated human frame. Your people, the humans, fight amongst themselves constantly. We see your transmissions. You are fractured, short-sighted, and driven by tribal fury. Yet you claim this dark mark represents unity, the unity found in shared shame, she observed, her voice low. How can such profound internal conflict result in a race worthy of alliance? Ren stood up, meeting her gaze levelly. Because, Your Majesty, the conflict is how we evolve. We are flawed, yes. but we are also fundamentally driven by love. The very first marks I ever took weren't for a combatant. They were for family. He rotated his arm, revealing a simple, crude depiction of a house with smoke curling out of a chimney. It was childishly rendered, almost hidden amongst the military lines. This mark is a constant, physical reminder of the home I fight for. Not the planet, not the government, but the simple, unglamorous concept of a place to belong. The Luminar have your crystalline world, your unified history, your perfect society. You are magnificent. But you have never had to fight to remember what simple, chaotic love feels like when the lights go out. He tapped the house gently. This mark is for my wife. She always said that no matter how far I went, I needed to carry the house with me. It's for my son, who grew up knowing his father might not come home. This is the anchor. When a soldier takes up arms, he doesn't do it for a treaty. He does it to protect a quiet, messy love, a single sparrow, a small house, a promise to a child. The massive warrior Dracos, who had remained silent and intimidating throughout the exchange, took a step forward. His crimson markings, signifying countless victories, pulsed violently. He was the most difficult of the Luminar to convince. If the concept of love is what drives your people, then why is the price of that drive always recorded in blood and permanent black ink? Dracos's voice was a deep, grating sound. Where is the mark that shows joy? Where is the permanent, perfect record of happiness? Ren looked at the warrior, the weight of the moment pressing in. This was the final, devastating question. The Luminar couldn't fathom a history that wasn't primarily glorious. Ren smiled faintly and didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached a hand up and deliberately unclipped the tarnished silver compass from his belt, the one he always carried. Dracos, Ren said, holding up the compass. This compass doesn't point to the north. It points to the one place I'm still fighting to get back to. But for a long time I didn't need it. I had the tattoos. The tattoos were my map. They showed me every wrong turn, every failed landing, and every promise I made to the dead. They were my navigational system back to the light. He looked at the Queen. We humans record the painful steps to freedom, Your Majesty, because the pain is the only thing we know for sure is permanent. Our joy is ephemeral. It's fragile. It's a moment. But the price paid for that joy, that stays with us forever. Queen Sable Vel'thara reached out a multi-digit hand, her movements slow and deliberate, and gently touched the black, chaotic swirl of the void on Ren's shoulder. The contrast was startling. The cool, luminous platinum and violet grace of the alien queen against the old, scarred, black-inked skin of the human medic. She finally understood. Her people wore their history as a divine right. Ren Varkes wore his as a profound, unending responsibility. His body was a sacred text of human pain, resilience, and ultimate, flawed accountability. She withdrew her hand, and in that instant, every single Luminar guard in the audience chamber, including General Kthar and Dracos, executed a perfect, synchronized motion. They dropped to one knee. It was not an act of surrender, but an act of unexpected, profound respect for a history they finally understood as truly heavy. Human Ren Varkes, Queen Sable Vel'thara announced, her voice ringing with finality, her marks pulsing with bright, respectful intensity. You have taught us that there is a courage far deeper than the flash of a battle-won light. You have shown us the price of a history we take for granted. The alliance is granted. Humanity has proved that it carries the weight of its own failures. We will fight beside you. The treaty was signed in silence shortly after, not on a data slate, but in the indelible mark of shared understanding. But the story of Ren Varkes was not over. He had earned the Queen's respect, and in the process found a new, unexpected purpose. The alliance was sealed. The sheer, unexpected emotional power of Ren Varkes' history had bypassed generations of diplomatic friction and technological suspicion. Humanity was not powerful, nor pristine, but it was accountable, and that was a currency the Luminar profoundly respected. The months that followed were a blur of integration. A joint human-Luminar command center was established, overseeing the vast, complex logistics of a multi-species security pact. Thalaris became the hub of this new galactic venture. Ren Varkes was no longer merely the delegation's medic. He was elevated to the position of cultural liaison and historical consultant, a title invented specifically for him. He advised Queen Sable Vel'thara on human psychology, politics, and most importantly the nuanced, painful cost of human decision-making. One evening, Ren found himself in a quiet observation deck overlooking the sprawling, crystalline capital of Thalaris. He was dressed in a simple, gray flight suit, a vast improvement over the stiff formal uniform. He wasn't alone. Sable Vel'thara joined him. She was wearing a streamlined dark flight suit that struggled to contain the radiant intensity of her biomarkings. The violet and platinum light flowing beneath her skin seemed to mirror the pulsing rhythmic glow of the city below. The atmosphere between them was no longer adversarial, but defined by a quiet, deep respect that had blossomed into something nearing friendship, a rare intellectual bond between two deeply burdened leaders. "We are cleared for departure," Sable Vel'thara said, her voice softer than it had been in the throne room months ago. "The Outer Rim colonies are requesting mediation. They have heard the rumors." Ren grunted, a familiar, slightly tired sound. He was shaving, running a sonic razor carefully over his jawline. He looked younger now. The lines of stress had been partially replaced by genuine, if infrequent, laugh lines. "What rumors, Your Majesty?" Ren asked, wiping the foam away. "They heard that the man of ink solves problems without firing a shot," she corrected, leaning against the observation deck's frame, watching him with those magnificent, multifaceted eyes. "They say the old human can see the history that is hidden, and therefore anticipate the future." "Rumors," Ren scoffed, putting the razor down. "I'm just a consultant. A glorified babysitter for two warring cultures." "You are a legend, Ren Varkis," she corrected, her voice firm. "You gave our warriors a new form of courage to aspire to, the courage of accountability. You gave my people a new reason to look past the light and into the darkness. Get used to it." He walked over to a small workbench in the corner of the room. Lying there was his old portable tattoo gun. He picked it up. It was small, tarnished, and dusty. He hadn't used it since the day he stood before the Queen and laid his history bare. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the weight and the familiar vibration of the tiny motor. "Are you going to bring that?" Sable asked, her luminous markings flashing with curiosity. It was almost an unspoken question. "Are you going to write down more loss? More debt?" Ren hesitated. The gun felt heavy in his hand, a symbol of the immense grief he had spent his life shouldering. He looked out at the vast, shimmering city of Thalaris, and then back at the Queen, whose alliance had finally given humanity a chance to breathe. He placed the tattoo gun back down into the drawer and shut it firmly. "No," he said. "I don't need to write it down anymore." The burden felt lighter. He no longer had to be the sole librarian of humanity's failures. The Luminar now understood the weight, and by accepting the alliance, they shared the duty of remembering and learning from the past. The history was no longer his alone to carry. Ren walked back to Queen Sable Vel'thara. The moment felt charged, not with political tension, but with the quiet intimacy of two souls who had truly seen each other. He stood beside her and slowly, deliberately, rolled up the sleeve of his gray flight suit. He didn't expose the chaotic sleeves of his entire history, just the inside of his forearm. The Queen looked down. Her breath caught. On his forearm, amidst the faded scars and the ancient black-inked memories, there was one new mark. It wasn't ink. It wasn't black, dark, or painful. It was a small, delicate, spiraling wisp of platinum light. It pulsed gently beneath Ren's skin, mirroring the exact unique pattern of light that flowed on the inside of Queen Sable Vel'thara's neck. It was a perfect, tiny, luminous representation of Luminar life and honor. The light pulsed gently, in perfect, synchronized time with the soft thrumming of the Queen's heart. This mark wasn't a tribute to loss. It wasn't a record of failure. It was the mark of a new life, a new beginning, and a powerful, impossible connection. It was the first human mark of Luminar honor. Sable Vel'thara reached out and gently touched the pulsing light on his arm. She understood instantly. It was the only mark of pure, uncomplicated hope he had ever acquired. She smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her face, and repeated the question from their very first meeting, but this time the tone was warm, familiar, and laced with gentle affection. "Why so many tattoos, old human?" Ren Varkis looked at her, his eyes clear and his heart full. He kissed her forehead, a simple human gesture she had now learned to accept. "Just enough," he said, his voice quiet with finality. "Just enough to find my way home." They walked out of the room together, ready to face the complexities of the galaxy, hand in hand. The weight was gone, replaced by the persistent, fragile, beautiful light of a new beginning. And that, my friends, is the story of Ren Varkis, the old medic who didn't fight wars but carried the cost of them. He proved that true strength isn't about how much glory you wear, but how much truth you're willing to bear. What about you? What mark, physical or internal, do you carry that reminds you of a lesson learned or a promise kept? Let me know down in the comments below. If Ren Varkis' story resonated with you, and if you believe that sometimes the most profound victories are those we etch onto our souls, please smash that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss the next epic story of human endurance and cosmic connection. Until then, remember to carry your history with honor, and I wish you all clear skies and gentle journeys. Take care.